The informative presentations are going to be due soon, so I'm making a video on how to record videos. Hopefully it'll help some of you get maybe a better grade. A couple things just kind of to begin with that necessarily don't affect your grade, but just make it easier to watch your presentation. One, the lighting. With the lighting, what you would like to do is have a light source on the other side of your camera. So I have actually two. I sit by a window that's opened up, and then I have a big light that sits over here that shines basically right on me. You would like to have some light on you if you can. What you would definitely prefer not to do is have the light behind you. And some people will do this on their videos. You'll see it. They'll have like a ceiling fan light back here that's shining towards the camera. It makes their face look all like in the shadows almost, and it looks a little scary. As an example related to that, there was a guy that recorded his on a cell phone in the back of his car at night and just had the little light up here that was kind of shining down on him, and it looked really creepy. And so we're not aiming for creepy on these presentations. That's definitely not in the delivery rubric. So think about the lighting. You'd like to think about the background some. For example, some people will do things that are just like almost offensive. Like they'll have empty liquor bottles in the background. It's like, that's not what we're doing here. That's not a good idea. Think of it as a, like if you were on a job interview, you wouldn't have, a bunch of stacks of clothes in the background. You wouldn't have, empty liquor bottles, etc. On mine, I just have some pictures back here, and it's just actually the reason that there's pictures back there. It's just where the light source was. So I could take the pictures down. You could actually put up a background. I've used green screens before, or with Zoom, you don't even need a green screen, and you can put a different background behind you. If you want to do that, go for it. Also, on recording presentations, it's going to be preferred that you don't use a cell phone for it, because it's just going to, it's not a TikTok video. You're trying to create a presentation like as if you were in front of a classroom presenting it with a PowerPoint like I have here. And so if you're doing it from a cell phone and you're holding it and it's like moving all over, you're in the back of a car or something, it's just, it doesn't look polished. Part of this later on is going to be that it's a persuasive presentation, that you're trying to persuade people of something. And so if you're using a cell phone and you're bouncing all over and the lighting source is behind you and there's empty liquor bottles, none of these things are going to help you with your persuasive message. So please think about those things, first of all. Related, and I have an entire separate video on the delivery rubric. You should definitely watch it. Some people just do the presentation, they don't watch the delivery rubric, and then they get a really bad grade. They're like, why did I get such a bad grade? It's like, well, you didn't watch the delivery rubric. You definitely should have done that. Related to this recording the presentations, though, there are two things that really stick out: the movement and the visual aid. On the movement, so you need to have the camera far enough back that we can see your hands. If we were actually in class, obviously that's going to be easy. You would see, everyone's bodies moving around, and you could move around as you do your presentation. Or what we're looking for here is that you have nonverbal messages that match your verbal message. For example, I've got 3 main points, 1, 2, 3, and I have this nonverbal that matches my verbal message. I also do expressive things with my hands, like right there. I'm accentuating that point when I do my hand like that. You don't want to overdo it, but you do want to have some movement with your hands to help us to comprehend your message. That's the first thing, movement. The second thing is a visual aid. You have to have one. Again, it's on the delivery rubric. Most people should have a PowerPoint or a Prezi, whatever, like I have here. There are certain situations where maybe you wouldn't need a PowerPoint. For example, if you're doing a presentation over some type of an object, like if you were playing guitar, you're doing your presentation, you're showing us how to play guitar, and so we can see the guitar. That guitar is your visual aid. The purpose of the visual aid is to help us to comprehend whatever your presentation is about. And so for a lot of people, that's going to be a visual or a PowerPoint like what I have here. My verbal message is going along with what's here on the PowerPoint. For a lot of you, that's what you want to do. But yeah, if you're playing a guitar, that would work as the visual aid because we can see what you're doing. Kind of related to this, as far as your visual aids go, you'll notice that mine are very sparse. There's only, 3 words on that one, 4 or 5 words there. The rule of thumb is 15 words or under. You do not want to write out the entire presentation and put it on a PowerPoint. I've seen PowerPoint slides that have 200 words on it. Absolutely not. That is not what we're doing here. Your visual aid should be just something to help us comprehend your presentation, and usually it's like they are signposts. Like I talked about movement. Now you know I was going to talk about visual aid next. So the visual aid is to help us comprehend your presentation. It's not something that we have to read in addition to listening to your presentation. On actually recording the presentation, so there's several different ways that you could do it. I'm sure you could look up, maybe hundreds. I don't know. There's probably that many different types of software out there to help you record your presentations. I use Camtasia, and so I basically have a split screen. Half of it is my face, half of it is my visual aid. And so that's how I like to do it, and it makes sense to me. With Camtasia, though, it is software that you have to pay for. That being said, I believe there's a free trial that you can use to record your informative presentations if you wanted to. There's probably going to be a watermark across the presentation, but that's not a big of a deal. It doesn't bother me if there's a watermark, because I do think it's probably one of the best softwares to use, especially when I used to do the green screen and do the entire lectures like that. It was really the best software that I had used was Camtasia. Also, Canvas has some kind of built-in software where you can record your presentations, and I believe do screen capture as well. I think some of the practice group presentations, some people use that. Just make sure, if you're going to use that one, that your faces are big enough that we can actually see it to do the delivery rubric. Which brings us to Zoom. I'm going to switch over to Zoom to show you some tricks on that. And finally, you could use something like Zoom. So this would definitely be good for your group presentations. The problem is that you're either on your face or you're basically on the visual aid. So what you want to do is switch back and forth between the two. For example, so I click this, and now I am sharing this. The problem is that I have a small face, and so the presentation's big, but my head's small. And this is a real problem for the delivery rubric. It's hard to see this. So when you're doing this, you're going to have to switch back and forth between the visual aid and your presentation. Probably want to be on your person, the speaker, about 80% of the time, and then about 20% of the time come back to the presentation, because some people had that flipped. I noticed on the practice group projects, it was like the most of it was the visual aid and very little on the speakers. The speaker is the centerpiece of the presentation, not the visual aid. So you want to be about 80% on you, the speaker, and only about 20% on the visual aid. If you go up to the top toolbar, you can stop share and then come back to it. Basically, however you want to do it to get it to make sense for your presentation. So you could use other, again, Zoom would be perfect if you're playing something like guitar, or if you are going to use Zoom and you're not going to have an actual visual aid, like an object, you're going to have a visual aid like a PowerPoint, and you're going to have to switch back and forth between those two. You're probably going to have to practice on that. So some of the groups on the practice group did have some issues with it. Definitely work on it before we get to the final group project. And even before you do your informative, don't wait till the last minute to record your informative presentations. There's a lot of people that end up turning it in late because they didn't spend the time to learn about software. As far as doing these classes online, you definitely have to spend some time with the software. Okay, I think that's it. If you have any questions on this, please post them in the discussion forums, in the discussion area. And if someone has a good background in tech stuff, if you see a question, you're like, oh, I know the answer to that, please go ahead and answer it, because I don't know. I don't use Canvas. I don't use a lot of these things. So mine, again, is Camtasia is what I use. And so that's the one that I know the best. But like something like Zoom, I don't use it that often. So if you know little hints, tips, tricks that can help all of us, please post them in there so we can all learn from that. Thank you for listening.